Hello everyone, David Lee here, and like Professor Metcalf, my favorite show is The Simpsons. And in true Homer fashion, my favorite part of the brain has to be the cerebrum, specifically the frontal lobe. It is the largest of the four major lobes in humans and mammals. It determines and shapes a human's personality. It attains full maturity around age 25 since it is the last of the four lobes to fully develop. The anterior portion of the frontal lobe is higher for cognitive functions than the posterior portion, which mainly focuses on premotor and motor functions. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body, as the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. The frontal lobe is responsible for many important cognitive skills. Some of those skills include, but not limited to, emotional expression, problem solving and decision making, memory, language, sexual behaviors, and speech and swallowing. The frontal lobe is really specific for decision making, and that is the behavior I want to focus on, or neuroeconomics. Neuroeconomics is defined as understanding the decision making process or the ability to process multiple alternatives and to follow that course of action. Parts within the frontal lobe that drive the decision-making process include the medial prefrontal cortex, stratum of basal ganglia, the nucleus accumbens, substantia nigra, anterior cingulate cortex, the orbitofrontal cortex, insula, and lateral intraparietal area. There are really three major parts in the decision-making process. The brain assesses the values within the context of that situation. Then the brain makes a decision based on previous valuations. That decision is then transmitted to the motor system for implementation. So, for example, many of us will face this in the future. We want to further a relationship or asking someone for their hand in marriage. One takes the values of this situation and assesses them. That could be physiological values, safety, esteem, or emotional values. Then we make a decision. That decision is then implemented by the motor system. And we either say yes, no, I do, I don't. That choice is usually valued in terms of loss. We tend as humans to avoid, bad consequences rather than approach good things. Damage to the frontal lobe has a major effect on the decision-making process. Poor decisions and showing little regard for consequences of their behaviors lead to negative consequences. Usually that results from damage to the amygdala. Damage to the hypothalamus has a negative effect on value judgments. Damage to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex has negative effects on social cooperation and impulse control. Damage to the orbitofrontal usually results in negative value and negative information in general about consumable rewards. Damage to the anterior cingulate cortex usually equals a negative effect on cost-benefit decisions. Damage equals no assigned value in many cases. Damage to the stratum and medial prefrontal cortex affects the values people assign to goods, actions, or rewards, and their response to those rewards. The response could be delayed or it could be cooperated. Damage to the frontal lobe has many effects on other behaviors other than decision making. These effects could be changes in emotional control, intolerance for frustration, which leads commonly to aggression, inability to plan a sequence of complex movements, or difficulty completing a multi-step task. For instance, that could be a task as simple as making a cup of coffee in the morning. That could be paralysis, loss of flexibility when thinking or stuck on a single thought, changes in mood and social behavior, a general sense of inability, can result in many different types of aphasia: Broca's, Wormic's, conduction, global, and transcortical motor or sensory. Ways to prevent damage to the frontal lobe can be as simple as wearing a helmet when playing a contact sport, when riding a bike, or when a helmet is generally useful for rollerblading, skateboarding, etc. Wearing your seatbelt in the car. If you're in a car accident, your seatbelt can prevent brain damage as you're not flying out the window or slamming your head into something. And if you see a fall sign, just be cautious of your surroundings. If it's wet, don't run. Watch the fall sign, as they're out for a reason, to protect you and to prevent bad things from happening and to keep you safe. That's the frontal lobe. Thank you for watching. See ya.